What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Fantasy Files podcast, where we talk about our favorite fantasy series and topics. We are your Nimbus agents, Spencer and Gabe, and today we are talking about the third book in the Arc of a Scythe series, The Toll by Neal Shusterman. All rejoice. If
I'll
you haven't
rejoice.
if you haven't read the final book in this trilogy, we highly suggest you take a break from this and go read it, because we will be going into full spoilers. But first, before you go, please hit that like button and subscribe so that you can see all of our future content, and maybe leave us a comment with what fantasy, YA, or sci-fi books we should be reading and discussing on the show. You can also follow our Instagram at Files Fantasy to join in on the discussion there. We're really excited to talk about this book today, but first let's talk about what's coming up in our next episodes. Next, we have an episode fully dedicated to just going through our Audible wish list and kind of deciding what our next book or book series is going to be. A lot of them are recommendations from you guys in the community, other podcasters, stuff that's been discussed on other shows and recommended. If there's a certain book you'd like to see us consider, please drop the name below or on our Twitter. After that, we have the next Dresden Files episode. That's books 4 through 6. We're going to be looking at Summer Night, Death Masks, and Blood Rites for that episode. So you guys can get caught up on that and join us for that discussion. Before we gush about The Toll, let's talk a little bit about what we've been reading. Gabe, I realized last week that I didn't really ask you your overall impressions of Nevernight. We talked about it a little bit, and by the way, I realized I kind of realized that I was a little hard on it last week, and that was mostly because of the narrator. I want to say that I did enjoy the book, and I probably will read the second one, and if I like the second one, I'll go on to the third. But I know I came off a little strong on that book,
Yeah,
but
the whispering, the
yeah,
whispering.
the whispering, it drove me nuts. It did. But no, I did really like that book. But yeah, it's kind of getting pushed further down my
Yeah,
TBR list now that I have all these other books that have been recommended lately. But at some point, I will get back to it. What After finishing the book, we talked a little bit about what you thought of it at first, but what were your impressions after finishing the book? Is it something that you want to go back to?
absolutely. I definitely want to go back to it, and I'm very much interested in reading the second book. And again, like you said, if I like the second, we'll go on the third, and so on and so forth. But I did. So the first, and we already talked about this, but the first, like, let's say 2 hours of listening, right, was very dark,
Yeah,
like probably too dark for me personally.
yeah.
But I pushed past that and then got to this incredible story that was just so full of, like, it was very rich. There was a lot going on. There's a lot of different uh players that come into play, and you can kind of see it play out. It was really cool. So I very much enjoy the series. I love the way that it ended, at least the first book.
Yeah.
Um and they meshed everything together really well in the way that they wrote it.
Yeah, I think one thing that I did really appreciate about that book is it is not, maybe some parts are, but it's not really slow.
Yeah.
It's kind of got a fast clip to it, and it moves pretty well. And so I appreciated that, especially after having read so many kind of slow moving books lately. I'm kind of, I'm so excited for this next episode talking about the our wish list and what books we should read, because I've been in kind of this slump lately, and it just seems like all these books that I've been reading just are not doing it for me.
Yeah.
And I haven't been able to find something that really clicks. And a lot of them are books that a lot of people like. So recently I finished Mark Lawrence's Red Sister, And that's a book that a lot of people like. I think it's the next book series that he wrote after his Broken Empire trilogy. And a lot of people really like the Red Sister series. And man, I just could not get into it. I don't know what it was about it. It was just kind of slow, and like the same kind of thing kept happening over and over, because basically what it is this girl who is possibly the guard of the city is after her because she killed a noble, and the only way that she really gets out of it is these nuns from this what do you call it, cathedral or whatever, come and get her, and they're like, we are going to not hide her, but like part of like the city or countries or whatever religious freedom is if a nun decides to take somebody in, then they can't really be messed with too much.
Huh.
And so they take this girl in, and the nunnery or whatever is like, they teach like combat, and so they teach you how to be like kind of an assassin, like warrior kind of person. And that alone was kind of an odd situation, but the same kind of things just kept happening over and over. Like, she's going to classes and she's learning this thing, and the next day she gets up and goes to more classes, and she's just learning and learning. It's just her in school like this entire time. And I'm like, man, like what is the plot of this book?
Yeah.
Like what is the point of all this? And near the end, it definitely starts to pick up, but it was just such a short amount of time that the story actually like picked up and was somewhat enjoyable, that I was like, man, I don't know if I'm going to go back to this series. And I even went on Reddit and I was like, hey, am I just like the odd man out here? Like, I am not understanding this story. Like, I am like, is this book just not for me? And everybody told me, they were like, yeah, like if you didn't like the first book, then you're probably not going to like the second one.
Yeah.
And most likely the series just isn't for you. And I was like, okay, that's fair. Not every book is for everybody.
Yep.
So moving on to other books and other series, and see if I can find something that really satisfies that, because it's kind of a bummer after reading so many good books. And in a lot of ways we've been spoiled
Yeah.
with
Or
the
I've been
books that we
spoiled.
yeah you've
You
been
spoiled
spoiled.
me. You had to do the work.
Yeah.
I've been the spoiled
Right.
one.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard when you read like, and there's lots of good books out there. I'm not saying that there's not, but when you've read a lot of the like top tier, like really good books, like most enjoyable books,
Yeah.
and then you start trying to venture out and find other stuff, not everything else is going to match up to some of these other books that we've read and enjoyed and loved.
Yep.
Just like the Shadow Saga, like that wasn't like a 5-star book or anything, but that's pretty indicative of what the kind of climate is for the rest of the books out there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's kind of like, you get some really good ones, and then most of them are okay.
Yep. And it sucks because you waste an Audible credit, right?
Oh, I know. And I'm
There
at
goes
the
a
point.
credit, and I listened to 20 minutes of this book, and I'm like, why did I do that?
Yes. And I'm at the point, I don't know if you've gotten there on your account, but on my account, they've stopped how many times I can return a
You can
book.
return? Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I
And
did that
so
2 days ago, man. I returned I think they let me do 3 books. I returned 3 books 2 days ago that I
oh,
was never gonna
really?
listen. Yeah, but
Oh,
it's
dang,
because I
nice.
haven't done it in forever. So I got
Right.
three credits, and then I
Okay.
spent once, and I got 2. So we'll see what happens with those. But
Nice. Yeah, they stopped me. They're like, you can't return
yeah,
any more
did the
books.
same to me. Yep.
Oh, so they did, and then
They
they
did. So
lifted it.
yeah, so I was gonna return like 15 books, like the very bottom of my Audible
Oh,
list. And so I returned 3 and then I said, sorry, we can't complete this transaction because you've reached your return limit. And I was like, oh, great. But at least I
Oh,
got 3
dang.
credits out of it. It's better than spending
Nice.
35 bucks or whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So what else have you been reading? Some Dresden Files?
Yep. So I've just been kind of, I guess, roaming through the Dresden Files and just kind of, I listened to some briefcases, right? The little short side stories, whatever they call it. That's what it is, right? What does he call that?
Side jobs.
Side jobs. Okay,
Yeah.
that and then briefcases. So I've listened to some of those, and then I recently started Turncoat, and I've just kind of been like not super into it, but like while I'm like today, like I washed my car, so like I put it on for that half an hour when I was washing my car. So not like very hyper focused, but that's what I've been reading. I've been kind of in a lull until we finish this episode, and we can start the rest of the
Yeah.
Dresden stuff, and we can do that. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. So far for the next episode, I've read Summer Night, and I'm in the middle of Death Masks. I think after Death Masks, I'm gonna like stop and go really quickly through another book or something while
And
you
then,
catch up,
yep.
and then when you start Blood Rights, I'll start Blood Rights, and then we can do the episode for that. But yeah, the past few days that I've listened to Summer Night and Death Masks, I'm like, man, I love this series so
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
I love the
Me
Dresden
too, dude.
Files so
Me
much.
too.
It's been so nice, and every time I go through it again, there's always something new that kind of pops
Yep.
up. But
Yeah, it
yeah,
is an absolute fallback for me, for sure. And I know it is for you too. It's an
yeah,
absolute fallback.
yeah,
When all else
definitely.
fails, Dresden Files.
Right. All right, what else have I been reading? I read so at night when we last talked at night I was reading The Slow Regard of Silent Things. Is that the
Yeah, you told
RE
me about
short
that. Yeah.
story?
Yep.
But you know what? I was reading it and I do like it and I am gonna finish it. But I kept going past my bookshelf and I kept seeing this awesome cover,
Prince of Thorns.
Prince of Thorns,
Okay.
and I kept walking by it, and I'm like, a good book cover always
Yeah,
really
it
gets
stands out,
me.
man. It
It
stands
always
out.
gets
Absolutely.
me. And so I'm passing by this book every day. And the other night I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna crack it open. I'm gonna read the first chapter, and then I'm gonna go back to the Ari novella.
Yeah.
And it's been like 3 or 4 days now, and I've just been reading this book every night.
Okay. Can you give me a quick little like let's hear
Yes.
just a little bit about it because I'm curious.
Yeah, I like it a lot so far. So it's about this 15-year-old who you find out in the first chapter or two that he is actually a prince. He's actually the son of a king,
Okay.
and he is in the line of succession. So like out of all his brothers and stuff, he's the one who would take the throne.
Yeah.
But there was one night there was a count or a duke or somebody that stormed the castle and killed his brothers, sisters, and his mom right in front of
Ooh.
him.
Ooh.
And he was like thrown back into like a thorn bush, and so he was like stuck in this thorn bush, and he's just watching his whole family except for his father get murdered. And so then he has like kind of a psychotic break or something, like he just like completely breaks down, and
Yeah.
he goes on this he gets like this band of mercenaries together, and they go like all across the country like raiding villages.
Yep.
And somewhere along them going through villages and like pillaging and stuff, he decides to head back towards the castle
Where his
to
parents and stuff were killed.
yeah, whereas
Okay.
whereas mom was killed and stuff, to reclaim the throne, to go see
Mm.
his father, the king. and this is after like years of being a mercenary.
Yeah.
And so it's like really dark. It's like it like doesn't hold back from being grim dark at all.
Okay.
And yeah, I like it a lot so far. It's I don't really know what it is about it. It's just like kind of cool to see like this band of mercenaries, and he's like leading them because everybody knows he's the prince. And so they're just doing like whatever he wants to do, and he's just killing all these people and
Yeah.
stealing and looting and doing crazy stuff. And
Is the book is sorry to interrupt, but is the book by
no,
Mark Lawrence?
yeah.
Okay, I just add it to my wish list. It sounds like something I would read, so we'll see.
So the thing about it though is the audiobook is not very good.
Okay.
That's why I'm reading it on paper.
Oh, that's right. Duh. Yeah.
Because
So
the
you tried
narr
the audiobook then?
I listened to the sample, and you
Oh,
can
okay.
listen to the sample and see
Yeah.
if it's something that you can stand. But basically, the narrator like pauses in between every single sentence, so he'll
Ooh.
say something, and there will be like a 2-second pause,
Ooh,
and then
yikes.
he'll do the next one.
Yeah, that
And
would bother me for sure.
dude,
That
oh
would bother
man.
me really bad.
And I don't know if it would be fixed by putting the audiobook in like 1.5 speed,
Yeah.
but maybe. But every single one of the reviews was like, I liked the story, but the narrator was not good. So
I'll have to give it a shot and see.
yeah. Whew. All right. Well, that's pretty much all that I've been reading. I did listen to a short story. I forget what the series as a whole is, but the short story is called The Silent Blade. And it's just about a kind of like a sword for hire, like a mercenary kind of guy.
Mhm.
And he's like a super rough guy, but deep down, he's got somewhat of a heart of gold,
Yeah.
which is pretty tropey, but I like it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, I read that. I forget who writes it. I think it might be like a self-published author. But I thought it was really interesting because it was free on Audible, and it's like 2.5 hours long, and it's a prequel to this larger series. And I kind of thought like I wish more people did that. Like I
Yeah.
wish like there's been so many series that I've wanted to get into, but I didn't want to spend a whole credit on the
Yeah.
first book.
Yep.
If I don't like it and I can't
Then you're
return
out of
it.
credit. Yeah, it's no
Yeah.
deal. Yeah.
And so I really liked the idea that this guy had put out a book, an audio book for free, that was just kind of like a short snippet of what you can expect from the series, and it helps you get to know the character, it helps you get to know the world, and it's kind of this like you know low commitment kind of thing that you get to like participate in. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
you don't have to fully commit to the series or anything. Feeling bad that you bought the first book and you're like, well, I might as well finish the trilogy or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, I really wish more people did that, kind of released a short story in the world of their series that you could experience and kind of decide on if it's
Yep.
something you want to commit to or not.
Of
I
course.
really
I
like that.
totally agree.
And I really like the short story too. Like I'm when I run out of stuff to read, I'm probably going to read that series. So it did
Is that
its
the one that you
job.
told me about? The Chaos Reigns or whatever it's called?
No,
Or is that different?
Chaos
Because
Reigns
that's another
is
free one, right? Another free.
no,
No?
Chaos Reigns isn't free. That's an audiobook that just got released on Audible from one of our friends on Twitter, Jay
Oh,
Smith.
okay. That's right.
He's a
That's right.
independent author. And yeah, it looks like a
Nope,
good
you're
book. I'm
good.
excited
Cleared up.
to
It
read
makes
it.
sense now. I just forgot about that whole thing.
All right, so should we talk about the toll?
Yes.
Woo! Man, first of all, a couple things I forgot to mention last week was a huge draw for these books, at least initially, was these book covers.
Mm.
The whole reason I picked up the first book was because of these awesome book covers, and you can see it behind me. They're like simple, but they're so creative. And
Yeah.
I remember the first time that I picked up Scythe, I had literally like walked by it and I kind of like did a double take and I like backed up and I was like, what is this? Because like on the shelf, out of all these other books, like it stands out. It's got this like kind of tan background with a red Grim Reaper kind of looking person on it with a scythe. And
Yep.
I was like, it was such a good cover. Like it does exactly what good covers are supposed to do.
For sure.
It made me back up and be like, wait a minute, I want to take an extra
Ah,
second to know what this book is. Because honestly, if I hadn't looked at the book right then and there, I probably would have never picked up the series because I never really saw it in advertising. I never really saw anybody talk about it after that. And so the book cover was extremely catchy and it really did its job. And I really, really like them.
nice.
And I love the Told book cover too. Like every single book kind of portrays what each book is about in such a simplistic and perfect way. Like the first book shows like one scythe on it, and it's like, you know, probably Faraday or
Yep.
somebody.
Yep.
And then the second book shows these two sides kind of representing Citra and Rowan, and also two sides for the second book. So it's kind of like visually
Yeah.
understanding that this is the second
Yep.
book by having two sites on it. And then the third book has three people on it, kind of visually understanding that it's the third book. And it's got like, you know, we on the third cover, we've kind of gone away from just having these hooded figures there. Now we have Grayson in the middle, dressed
Yeah.
as the Toll. He's got his, you know, little scapular on him and stuff.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I'm like, man, they whoever did the art for those covers is very good at their job.
A genius.
Yeah, I forgot to. I'm just gonna go down this whole list of things I forgot to say last week. I forgot to ask you about kind of what your initial impressions of the series were when you first picked it up, because I think I recommended it to you when we were on a project, when we were on a construction job,
Yep.
and I think you were like out of stuff to read. I'm like, you might like this Scythe series.
That's exactly what
And
happened.
yeah, like what were your initial impressions? And then also finishing the first two books and getting to the third, what was your overall impression of like this third book, of like everything that kind of like wrapped up?
Ties it all together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So originally, and exactly what you said is spot on. I was out of books to read. It's like, hey, I think maybe I asked you. I was like, do you have any more books that you could recommend that I could check on Audible? So he says, yeah, I think there's a Scythe series that I really enjoyed. That's really good. And again, like at that time, like I was brand new to fantasy, right? Like I had just finished reading the Dresden Files. I was very much new into the world of fantasy, and and then of course this is, I guess, fantasy, but more sci-fi than fantasy, kind of
Sci-fi.
young adult. Yep, sci-fi for sure. But again, even in my head, like I think it was kind of fantasy in the sense of like maybe not magic, but like it's like I don't know. Anyways, sci-fi. And so I read it, and I read, I don't know, I was maybe in an hour and a half in or whatever, and I told myself, I was like, this has such incredible potential to be something absolutely incredible. Like I could just tell from reading what was there in the first hour, that like this could be a really cool book. And so of course I kept reading it, kept going on, and it turned out to be this like just masterpiece of like sci-fi. It was so cool the way that I mean, you think about these ideas, right? Like the AI and this and that and all these things that come together, and it was just so good. So my first impressions were absolutely incredible. maybe one of the best first impressions I've ever had reading a book.
Nice. And then getting into the
Oh,
third
the
book.
third. Yep. Sorry. The third book. And again, like after reading the first two, all this, there's so much stuff that's set up, right? You take these first two books to set up this game plan that's going to happen in the third book. And then the third book happens and you're like, this is crap that I didn't think was going to happen. You know what I mean? Like this was all like stuff that like I didn't even think would be a possibility. And then all of a sudden it starts happening like that. And it's like, wow, it's just good, man. It's really good. The way that it ties together at the end is like superb.
Right. Yeah, that was one thing that I kind of liked about the third book. At first I had, when I very first read The Toll, I had, I think, kind of mixed feelings about it, but that was also because I hadn't read the other two in so long that all of a sudden The Toll came out and I was kind of like, oh yeah, I should pick that up. And I read it, and I think I was just kind of like distracted during that time in my life when I first read The Toll.
Yeah.
And so I had these kind of mixed feelings on it. But after reading it this time, I'm like, man, I really liked how, as much as I love Citra and as much as I love Rowan, I'm so glad that he expanded this world and made the story about so much more than them, because then it's not like this kind of like hero of ages kind of trope. It's
Yeah.
like all of these people are each playing their part, and
Yeah.
they all like have a hand in essentially, the end of the world kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
End of the world as they know it. And yeah, so I was really I'm really really glad we reread this series, because again, not that I had a bad impression of the third book, but I was very like medium on it.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad we reread it, because it's completely changed my mind on the Toll.
For sure.
Something else that I forgot to mention last week that I thought was kind of interesting is we talked about the vault of relics and futures.
Yeah.
And, I thought it was interesting that they named it that, because when you have Citra and Rowan locked in the vault at the end of the last book, it is literally a vault of relics, being the old
And
Scythe
yep.
robes, and the future, like the future of the Scythedom,
Yeah.
is there locked into it. And it's kind of like this time capsule of both of those things. It has the old like robes and the diamonds, and the diamonds are also part of the future of the Scythedom.
Yep.
But you have Rowan and Citra, like I said, who are the future of the Scythedom.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of an interesting,
Play on words almost.
yeah, almost like borderline prophecy kind
Yeah.
of. I thought that was really cool. And I also, I never really thought about it much until going through the second book this last time. But Curie, no matter how much Citra had explained things to Curie, she still hated Rowan. But then
Yeah.
at the end of the book, she still like saved him. Like she still wanted him to be in
Yep.
the vault with Citra. She could have easily like turned around and like cut Rowan's throat and
Yep.
then just put Citra in the vault. But I think at the end there, after seeing all this destruction that Goddard is
Put
bringing
in place and
about,
made. Yeah.
I almost wonder, it doesn't say it explicitly, but I almost wonder if she kind of has this change of heart and knows that he needs to continue his mission of killing these bad Scythes. Either that, or she just knew that Citra loved him
Yeah,
and
for
and
sure. And
wanted
was
to
trying to
do it for Citra.
give her that courtesy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. That's a good way to put it. That courtesy. Um, so this is super exciting. I just read a ton of information about this
Okay.
2 days
Yeah.
ago and added it to the notes. I have two really exciting things to talk about that I'm so pumped on.
Hmm.
So the Scythe movie is in the works with Universal and Amblin Entertainment. And Gary Doberman, who did the movie It and Annabelle,
Oh,
is
wow.
adapting the film, and he's writing the new draft for the film, the new script, after someone named Sarah Gamble, who did you know, Sarah Gamble would have been a really good fit for this too, because she did Supernatural and The Magicians and the Netflix show You, which has a ton of very like kind of ambient scenes that just kind of play with your mind a little
Yeah.
bit. And so she would have been a really good person for this as well. But I think she ended up backing out of it, and Gary took over. And why I'm excited about Gary, why I'm excited about Gary is that doing It and Annabelle, it might bring more of like a grittier, kind of darker feel to the Scythe series. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Which would be pretty sweet.
oh man, like because the Scythe series is dealing with such like kind of dark subject material already, that having something like that, I think someone who does a lot of horror movies or thriller movies would do a really good job with the series and kind of bring a darker edge to it.
For sure. Absolutely. I totally agree.
Um, Neal has said that he wants Helen Mirren or Meryl Streep to play Scythe Curie. Gabe, you youngin, do you know either of these people?
I know Meryl Streep, but I honestly don't know if I could put, I know the name, and I think I would know if I see her face that that was who it is, but the other one, I have no clue.
So why don't you do a quick Google search
Okay.
and find Helen Mirren? I personally do not think that that Meryl Streep would. I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah. Okay, hold on. So I just Google search Helen Mirren. Let me Google search Meryl Streep just in case. And yeah, Meryl Streep would definitely win the case between the two of those for sure.
Really?
I think that
Okay,
I think that the other one, the other lady, what's her name? Helen something?
Helen Mirren.
Yeah, it just doesn't, that doesn't fit for me. I think Meryl Streep has,
Ooh,
yeah, I think that would be who wins in my book anyways.
interesting.
I think
That's
the other one looks too old, and I hate to say this, I'm not trying to be a dick,
sure.
but
No,
looks too
it's
old,
fair.
right? She looks like she's a lot older. When I was to see Scythe Curie, like maybe like 50, 60
Right.
years old in my head. And so that, I think that's why that fits a lot better.
Okay. Yeah, I don't disagree with you about the age. I always find it really interesting. I really like that we have very different
Yeah,
ideas
yeah,
on how we picture some of these characters.
yeah,
Like I found out recently that you don't see Vin the way she's portrayed on one of the covers.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I was like, oh wow, that's really surprising. And so I really
Yep.
like that we have different ideas of how we envision people. But for me, Helen Mirren, even though she's possibly a little old for the role, I that's like exactly how I envision Curie.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And Meryl Streep, I thought had, and you know, this is gonna sound so shallow, and I'm sorry everybody, but
Oh, you're good. It's just an opinion though. You're good.
yeah,
Gotta say it.
I think that Meryl Streep just has like too long of a face for what
Yeah,
I envision. When I envision like Marie Curie, I envision kind of like a rounder face and
yep.
like shorter, and not like just like kind of like a shorter like I don't know how to explain it, just
No,
like
no,
kind
I
of a
think I understand
rounder
what you're saying.
person.
Yeah, like kind of like tighter knit in her face and
Yeah,
whatnot. Yeah.
exactly. kind of more like a button. You know what I mean? Like,
Okay. Yep.
you
Cute
know
as
what
a
I
button.
mean? Cute as a
Yeah.
button.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I picture Curie. And so, I don't know who the other contenders were, but anyway, Neal was saying that he would love either of them to play Scythe Curie.
Yeah.
And he wants to be the voice of the Thunderhead.
Oh, wow. I've never heard the dude's voice, so I don't know if he could pull it off.
I think he could. I've listened to some of his interviews,
Okay.
and yeah, I think he has a good voice. I think that he could pull it off. Like I could even see him like reading an audiobook or something,
Okay.
and it
Good
would be
deal.
pleasant to listen
Perfect.
to.
Perfect.
Um, yeah, and I highly recommend anybody out there. I highly recommend to look up some of Neal Shusterman's interviews. They're all really, really interesting.
I will. I will definitely will do that after this.
Are you ready for this, Gabe?
Of
Are you
course I
ready for
am. I've
this
been
part of
ready for
news?
this for like a week and a half, two
Oh
weeks.
my gosh. Okay. Neal has announced that he is writing a short story collection for the Scythe series, and it will be published in 2022. And basically, he just like reached out to fans, I think, and was like, what do you guys want? Like, what do you guys want written about?
Yeah.
And people just kind of told him, like, hey, we want a story about where Rowan and Citra ended up. And we want a story about what it was like for Rowan on the spaceship. And,
Yeah.
we want a post the Toll sister Astrid story. And he's just kind of like, okay.
All right. Let's
And
do it.
he's like, what was the other one? Possibly a short story about Rand is what I think I saw. Yeah, or an early Scythe Rand short story, which would be really cool to see her as an unsavory and Goddard, finding her and
Yep.
training her to become a Scythe. And then short stories about the two unknown charter regions. That would be super sick. And then also a short story about the early founding Scythes.
Yes. Yes.
And so like a prequel.
Yep. To the whole thing.
And dude, I literally saw this the other day and I was so excited. I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't believe this is happening because I've seen other people say that he didn't want to go back to the Scythe world, that he kind
Yeah.
of wanted to, he left it all nice and tied up and he kind of wanted to leave it.
Yep.
And so for him to come out with this collection of short stories is such a great like
Absolutely.
love letter to the
Yep.
fans.
Yep.
And it's a way better it's a way better solution than writing another trilogy about Rowan and Citra's life on the next planet, because really, what could you do with that? Like, I'm sure Neal could find something,
Yeah.
but it's so much better. Like, it's so much smarter to write a series of short stories about all these things we want to know about.
Yep.
And that just answers everybody's questions so much better than, going on a whole nother trilogy or doing a prequel series, even though I would love those things.
Yeah.
I think this is such a smart solution.
Yep. I totally agree.
I think that's all I had from what I had forgotten about last week. So let's go into more about the toll. There's not much more to say about the author and the audiobook narrator for this one.
Yeah.
Other than the audiobook narrator just continued to do such an amazing job. Like it like some of the things I was like, man, I'm really surprised. Like there was times where he was like shouting when the character was shouting,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
like he did like crying voices really well. Like at the end when Citra and Faraday reunite, and they're
Yeah.
both crying, and his voice is like quavering, and I thought that was he did a really good job with all of the voices. And then something I guess I didn't talk about last week was how many different voices he does.
Yeah,
Like,
of course. Absolutely.
it's like Nick Podell
It's a
levels
lot. It's a
of,
lot.
yeah, like
I thought about, I had like a stray thought about that today because I
yeah,
knew we were doing this podcast, right? And I thought about that. And it was exactly the same. It's like I counted, like in my head, I tried to count like Faraday, Citra, Rowan, Goddard, all these and they're not just different, like they are very much different voices, right? They
right.
sound completely different. They're a different person. And so it's cool. He does a great job.
Yes. And even accents. He
Yeah.
did accents so well, like Pozuelo
Yep.
and some of the other regions, and like everybody in
Argentinian
like,
size and Mexiteca, all those
yeah.
places. Yeah, very
Oh
good.
my gosh. Like who is the guy, Tekamenan, or was that
Tekamanen,
his,
yeah.
yeah.
That's the high blade Tekamanen, yeah.
Yeah, dude, he did like it sounded like somebody from Argentina,
Yep,
right?
it
Like,
totally did. Yeah, of course.
yeah.
Absolutely. He nailed it.
And then I also have a couple short things for storytelling here. This book was interesting. I don't know if the same thing happened in the other books and I just didn't notice it. But did you notice all the time jumps in this book?
In the third one, yes. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because I realized about a quarter of the way through the book that we were looking at a timeline of 3 years.
Yeah.
And even when Citra gets woken up, when she gets revived, there's stuff after that that happens with Faraday and Monira on the island that is happening before she gets revived.
Yeah.
So the timeline is kind of going all over the place. About quarter of the way into the book, we see Citra get revived.
Yep.
And then we see Faraday and Monira do a bunch of stuff on the island.
Yeah.
And it's not 3/4 of the way through the book until we see Faraday get the news that Citra's revived. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, wait, that happened a
Yep.
while ago. So they're on a completely different timeline
Yeah.
than what's happening in the Citra timeline. And I thought that was really interesting. And it never happened in a way that hampered the story, because I think any other author, if you had confused timeline like that enough, it would have been like, wait, what's going on? These are all
Yeah.
happening at different times. But it didn't, like, even if you didn't pick up on that, it doesn't really matter, because
Yep.
like all the stuff that is happening is all separate from each other. So it doesn't really matter if they're
Yeah.
happening at different times. And that was actually something that I just caught on this reread. I didn't catch it the first time I read the book. And so I thought that was really interesting, how there's all these time jumps, a period of 3 years, and everything has its own story, and they don't necessarily need to all play out at the same time.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool.
For sure.
Um, in this book, we see a combination of Scythe journals, Thunderhead musings,
Yep.
Thunderhead iterations, and religious texts and commentaries.
Yeah.
Gabe, what did you think of these?
Oh, they were incredible. Versus, so like I guess in context, right? The other two books are mostly Scythe, and you have some Citra and Rowan, or maybe not Rowan. Do they have Rowan journals?
No. Rowan didn't
Okay, they
have
don't.
journals, but Citra had journals,
Okay. Yep.
Curie, Faraday.
Yep. And so mostly Scythe stuff. And when you start hearing things from these these other point of views that really come into play in this third book, right? Like the Tonus and Curate Mendoza and the Thunderhead, and it's just very interesting to see because you start like hearing this stuff right almost before it happens in the book, or I guess before what you're reading, and so it's interesting to see it play out and see how it all works together. But I probably enjoyed these more so than the other ones from the Scythe. Not that they weren't good, but these offered a lot more kind of exotic nature, I guess, to
Yeah.
themselves versus the last two books. So it was very interesting to see that play out and kind of see how they worked, how they ran them.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, in the first book we get only Scythe journals, and in the
Yeah,
second book we get only Thunderhead musings. And kind of in this third book, it was like, all right, well, let's get everybody's point of view into the chapter intros or the chapter exits. And it really mirrored what was going on in the story as a whole, because where the first book is, the first book, you're getting really only the sides point of views.
yeah,
Like, you didn't really get any point of views that are outside the sides. And then the second book, you get a lot of, like, you get side stuff, but you get a lot of Grayson and Tonus and like
yeah,
all these, more of the Thunderhead side views.
yeah,
And then in the third book, you're getting literally everybody. Like,
yeah,
everybody is a key player in the story. Everybody makes a difference. And so then you're getting everybody's chapter outros
yep.
in the book. And it mirrors the main story so well. What did you what was your first impression of some of the Tonist religious, like their Bible and commentaries?
It was it was interesting to say the least. That would probably
Yeah,
be my way of saying it, right? Because I think the way that they set it up was like, they were talking about like for instance, like the toll, right? Like the noise that the Thunderhead made, all the circuits broke, everything happened. So like listening to them talk about that, the noise and what that means like religiously and significantly to their religion was super, super interesting. I don't know
yeah,
if I thought it was kind of, it seems like, and maybe it's written that way, but it seems like kind of weird. Like as an outside perspective, I would think that shit's weird. You know what I mean? Like I would
yeah.
think the whole Tonus thing would be kind of weird. But then you like hear Carrie Mendoza like say these different things about the toll, and you're like, holy shit, that's so spot on. Like either that happened after all this shit happened and they made it up, or it happened before and it was a prophecy.
Well, so did you realize that the all the religious texts and stuff they're after the book, so they're in the future.
Okay, yeah, yeah, and that's what I thought. So then it is a prophecy, right? Those are all real things that he was like they were part of,
No, so
or no?
the religious texts are, so
Oh, okay, I get it, I
basically
get it.
what's alluded to is that Astrid, when she's on her rocket ship out into space, she's
Okay.
writing all these religious texts, but she's blowing them like way
And
out
then
of
okay,
proportion.
yep, I get you now for sure.
So like the thing that I thought was funny about it is, you know, what she's writing down is something similar that we would see in the Bible. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah,
these very like religious texts about, and then the thunder came down and the voice of the toll and
yeah, yeah,
stuff like that. And so I thought it was interesting where, and I have a whole section on this down below, but I thought it was interesting how we know what the toll did, and we know that he was just a guy named Grayson Tolliver, and that he just happened to be the only one who could talk to the
yeah.
Thunderhead, and like everybody else saw him as this huge religious
He
figure,
was
and he
like a
didn't.
god. He was like a
Yeah,
god to them.
and
Yeah,
he didn't want to be this religious
yeah,
figure. And then we see in the religious text, like, one of them was like, as everybody knows, we all know that the toll existed since the dawn of time, that he created humankind.
yeah,
And it was like,
yeah.
wait, no, like,
You're like,
what?
no, that's not it.
And so it was really interesting to see how, you know there's no one else to write these things for the toll, but
Yeah.
you have this religious zealot who's in space for 1,000 years
Yeah.
just writing this stuff.
Yep.
And then the the religious commentaries show that she did get to her planet, and that the other Tonists are all reading this religious
Yeah.
scripture,
That she
and they're
wrote. Yeah.
writing their own commentary on it.
And she was
So
all worried that she wasn't going to be important too. I remember that. She's like, what is,
yeah,
no, this is the, and then of course she ends up this absolute like authority in this religion, right? Like everything
yeah,
she wrote is true.
I thought that was a really interesting ending for her. She got like exactly what she wanted.
Yep, exactly. Maybe in a different way, but it was the ultimate goal was what she wanted.
Right, right. What about, oh, the Thunderhead iterations? Those
Oh,
were cool,
those were my favorite, by far
dude.
my favorite.
It took a while when I read this the first time. It took a
Yeah,
while for me to understand what they were,
yeah,
but after a while, you kind of get this idea. You're like, wait, is the Thunderhead trying to create a new Thunderhead?
yeah,
And sure enough, you see more and more iterations,
yep,
and it's trying to make another Thunderhead. And what I thought was interesting about that is, a large part of our conversation last week was thinking about how badly the Thunderhead could have gone,
yeah,
and how, releasing control to this AI, there's so many other things it could have done. It could have enslaved humanity,
yep.
could have done all this other
It could have
stuff, but it just
destroyed
happens to be
humanity in
a
a heartbeat. I mean, it could have done a lot of crap.
yeah. And but luckily it's a benevolent
Yeah,
being, a benevolent sentient AI. But through these Thunderhead iterations, we see how badly it could have gone.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like there was one iteration that was like, oh, like I'm definitely gonna enslave humanity. Like,
yeah, yep,
and so I thought that was really cool that we kind of got a peek into like what could have been.
yep. I
Um,
totally agree. Yeah, I very much enjoyed those. I think that it was interesting is to almost see the progression, right? Of like, and it wasn't, I guess, a progression because I think it changed on how it
well,
did it, but
it was kind of because they got like better and better and
you
better.
bet, yeah, absolutely. So I guess reverse. Because I was thinking like better and better and better, right? But it didn't. It got better. And so like the just like you said, the first ones were like pretty bad and enslaving humanity. One was like, why aren't we are above them, right? We're so
Yeah,
far. We are the ultimate thought process in the world. Yada yada yada. And he gets closer. It's like iteration 7,300,000
yeah,
something thousand. Like
yeah,
so many go by, and then
yeah.
eventually he gets what is the name? Remember, I'm bad with names. What is the name of the final? What is the
Cirrus.
name? Sirius, exactly. Sirius Prime or whatever it was. And so it was cool to see that play out.
Yeah, there was, I think, what was
Or
the other
Sirius
ones?
Alpha. Sirius Alpha is what it was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there was one that was like, oh, like humanity is fine, but I don't really want anything to do with them. Like I'm
Yeah.
not gonna, like
I'm
I
not gonna
just
help
want,
them out. I just want
yeah,
them to do their own shit.
yeah, like I just want to exist and explore the back brain and view all this other information. And so the Thunderhead could have been this thing that they just released, and it kind of never came back. Like it could have been this thing that just didn't have anything to do with them,
Yeah.
and then they'd have to make a new one. Like it would just go off on its own and
Yep.
explore the world. And then there was one that wanted to enslave everybody, and then there was one that um, what else? There was one that wanted to be like their god, like
Yeah.
not like enslave them, but like be above them and be like worshipped.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly too, there were a couple that were so close to the mark, right? That sounded
Yes,
so close to being exactly what the Thunderhead wanted, but they were just slightly off or slightly had that kind of weird mentality. And those were really super eye-catching to me, right? Because it's like you can tell he's getting closer to this goal that he's made for himself. And like
right.
you hear this uh, other, I guess, AI talk about what he thinks is the right thing to do, and Thunderhead's like, it's right there, like it's so
Yeah.
close, yada yada. But you're not there yet. Like I have to terminate this. You're not there yet.
Yeah, and I thought the kind of interesting spin that they put on that was that the Thunderhead was created by humans.
Yeah.
And so it had this biological component because these biological people had put themselves into the Thunderhead in the way that they created it.
Yeah.
And so that was why the Thunderhead took over Jerry's body, because
Yep.
it needed another human to create something
Yeah.
so that it could be exactly like the Thunderhead.
Yeah.
And so it had to become human for a while to
To
then create
re-understand.
Cirrus,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it needed that biological component. And I'm like, man, that was a really, really interesting way
Yeah.
to spin that.
I
And
agree.
I can't wait to talk about that down below because that was such a great scene.
Yep. I totally agree.
Um, so let's talk about the world. Last week you mentioned how you liked all these different regions with the
Yeah.
cool names, and
Yep. They
so
renamed him kind of and yada yada yada.
I specifically kept an eye or an ear out for them through
Okay.
this read.
Yep.
And we see mention of several new regions. We have Sub-Sahara.
Yep.
We have Franco-Iberian, which is probably like a French kind of region,
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
and Chill Argentinian.
Chile, Argentina. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep. We get to see a mention of a new charter region, which is the basis for one of the main characters in this book, or maybe not
Yeah.
main characters, but a large side character.
Yep.
We see Madagascar, where everyone is forbidden from choosing a gender until they get older. We also see that, oh yeah, I thought this was
Yeah.
interesting.
Yep.
There's Tasmanian divers with gill form breathers that work as salvage crews, and they're like the best salvage crews.
Yeah.
I thought that was cool. But yeah, so Madagascar is kind of interesting. They don't choose a gender at all until they're older, and then they can decide. And a lot of people who live there, when they're 18 or whatever, they decide to not choose at all and be gender fluid.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, we see in the world in this book, we see Tonus that have removed their tongues or removed their eyes or
The
whatever.
sibilant tonus.
Sibilant
Yep.
Tonus. And so they play a huge part
Yeah.
in what
Massive.
happens in the story, and they're the ones that have removed their tongues and stuff, they're more of the like angry Tonus, like more of like the radical
Yeah,
Tonus
very
that want to
radical.
like try
That's
to
what I was
kill
gonna say.
sides.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, so they're kind of an interesting group. uh, the Thunderhead, I realized it's mentioned in this book that the Thunderhead creates fake financial drama in the stock market because it knows that humans, like there's something in humans that need that
That extra
interaction. Like,
challenge or
yeah.
interaction or scare. Yeah, for sure.
And so that's just another part of it being super benevolent, is creating these things that don't need to be in the world, but that make the humans happy.
Yep.
Um, and the last thing I have for the world building is that the artist Ezra in this book is a good example of how much creativity has suffered in this world.
Mm.
Like it was saying that uh, that people just paint the Mona Lisa, and it's
Yeah.
like not that hard.
Yeah.
And so, they're kind of saying like the mortal age artists, they had something that the current world artists don't,
Or could
right?
not even find if they tried, right?
Yeah,
Like it's something that's just lost.
yeah. And I think, I I kind of wonder what that is. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
obviously we see this world that has just kind of slowed down in a way to
Yep.
like this doldrum kind of thing. But I think it really must be true that pain invites creativity.
Mm.
It really must be true that bad things drive people. Have you seen the meme that's like, what is it like? Good men. One second, let me.
Yeah, find it.
So this is something that I've seen get passed around on social media, and it says, "Hard times create strong men.
Mm.
Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times."
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, I think that's kind of similar to what's happening in this world is right now the good times are creating not necessarily weak men. I mean, it is, but
Yeah.
it's just creating like weak minds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like weak everything, weak
Yep.
fulfillment. And so nobody has the same joie de vivre.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
don't have the same like love of life that the mortal age people did. Yeah. So anyway, I thought that was interesting how
It is.
we kind of see that through this artist who goes to the toll and he's like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm not being fulfilled. Like,
Yeah.
please help me be fulfilled. And Grayson tells him to start doing basically graffiti.
Yeah.
And so, this artist kind of does this thing where there's a little bit of a thrill to it because he's not supposed to be painting these public spaces, and even like paint something on the Scythe owned building. And, he's finding more fulfillment in it because he is, he has this little extra thrill of life to it.
And I want to say too, with that, it's something that Grayson as himself tells him, right? That the
Right.
Thunderhead is not a part of Grayson, like lies to him and says, like, hey, I think that this would be good if you were to do this. And the Thunderhead later is like, why did you lie to him? Why did you tell him that? And of course
Yeah.
it works out good in the end because that is what he was looking for, truly.
Right. Yeah. And, the interesting thing about that was, the Thunderhead asked him why he did it, but the Thunderhead wasn't like mad that he did it.
Yeah, yeah,
And it kind of leads to all these other situations where Grayson does something and then he asks the Thunderhead, he's like, was that okay?
yeah,
Like, was it okay that I did this thing? Like, I need you to tell me when I've like hit the limit of what I should be doing, like when I step over the kind of bounds that we have here.
yeah,
And the Thunderhead kind of comes at him with like this philosophical, well, what is bad kind of
yeah,
thing. And the Thunderhead or Grayson, you know, gets to a point where he asks Morrison to glean that Tonist curate, and he's like super upset about it. And he's like, Thunderhead, I need you to tell me that that was a bad decision, that what I just did
yeah,
was horrible and
yeah,
reprehensible. And the Thunderhead is like, that's not something I can decide for you. Like, only you can decide what is bad. Like,
yeah,
the Thunderhead's like, that's where humanity and I differ, and that's where humanity has to make its own decisions.
Yeah.
Is because I can't, like, part of the Thunderhead's programming is it
Not to decide
cannot,
on those final factors like that.
yeah, it cannot decide what is good and bad. It can
Yeah.
decide what is against its laws. The Thunderhead has laws in place that it enforces, but it can't decide what is morally good or what is morally bad.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was an interesting responsibility on humanity, in this world that is kind of up to them. Like, it's up to the humans to decide what is good and bad. And it even makes me wonder if the average human in this world even really thinks about that.
Yeah.
Because, they know what is legal and illegal, but do they know what is good and bad?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they don't, that's not really a part of the world in a lot of ways. So, and I think that's also why we get so many mentions of people having like 5 families or going from family to family to family, because there is no, everything goes on for so long
Yeah.
that there really is no good and bad when it comes to that. It was, I don't know, I thought a lot about that, and I thought that was a really interesting part of the book that I had never considered before.
Yep.
I got some various notes here that we can just go through. So did you realize that none of the Scythes that went to space brought their rings with them?
So
So
I did, but it wasn't until later that I did. So it was kind of like a late, I guess, arrival at that point.
none of them brought the plagues with them to space.
Yep, exactly.
So everybody who went up into space is gonna live forever like they were
Right. Never
before.
gonna have the problems that they left down at the other world.
Yeah. And I would be kind of interested to see, without that fail safe, do they create another Scythedom up
Mm.
there?
Yep.
And I think somewhere in the book it said like it would be like 10,000 years or something before they needed a Scythedom on
Yeah.
Mars. But it made me kind of wonder, without, because that fail safe that happened at the end, that took care of the overpopulation problem.
Yep.
And so all these people that went up to space, now they're gonna live forever, but they, at some point, they're gonna have an
Yep.
overpopulation problem.
Yep.
Let's see, so there was a lot of biblical references throughout this book, including Citra mentioning the wall of Jericho. And normally I would have kind of overlooked this, but there was so many other points in the book that talked about, like, it had so much like religious crossover, that I wonder if this was part of it.
Yeah.
The plagues that got released from the rings at the end are eerily similar to some passages in the book of Revelations in the Bible about, the 7 plagues or whatever that will be
Yeah.
there at the end of days, and they'll all be present at the same time. And I'm like, man, that's an interesting way. If that was the intention, that's an interesting way to incorporate it.
Yep.
There's a lot of, like I said, biblical crossover, like the religious text saying that Grayson Tolliver was there from the beginning of time, and created the universe and created humankind and stuff. And I was like, okay, that's obviously a reference to like Genesis.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I actually covered most of this earlier. Oh, and the cycle of life. So what we see at the end is what would have been like this perfect solution of people dying on Earth and then the Thunderhead taking them up to the sky for them to live again. And
Yeah.
that sounds a lot like, Christianity, like, or tons of religions, like you die and then you go to you go to the sky, heaven, right?
Yep.
And you live again up there. And so I thought that was a really interesting, an interesting way to incorporate that. It's just mirroring it in so many ways. I don't know. Did you notice any of these things?
I didn't, maybe not as much as you did, but I definitely did notice them. Yeah, for some reason the connection wasn't made superiorly like in my head, I guess you could
Sure.
say. But it was there. Especially like the walls of Jericho, like that was a big one, right? Like I
Yeah.
thought about that, especially with the, Jericho having the person there named that and
Right.
whatnot. And so that was brought up and whatnot. But I think the rest of them are um not new to me, but I guess new things that you're showing me.
I thought it was they were very subtle, and
Yeah, yeah,
it was I think anybody who doesn't, know the Christian or Catholic Bible
yep,
extensively would kind of not really notice it. But if you do know a little bit about that, like, it's really interesting to see some of the ways that Neal incorporated these things, because he's kind of building this religious figure in Grace and Tolliver,
yeah,
and it's like a big part of the end of the story, really, like
yeah,
with all the religious texts and commentaries and stuff, like those are all happening in the future. And
yep,
so it's kind of interesting, all these like connections he kind of made this like the religious book. Like this book wasn't so much about the Scythedom as it was kind of the Tonus, but mostly just about like the toll, and
yeah,
him like becoming this big religion in the future.
yep,
And I'd be really interested to see if we'll get some sort of book in the future that has to do with Tonus, or that is not like another Scythe book, but like something that is set in the world that has to do with like the Tonus and something going on with them.
I agree.
Um, oh yeah, so Faraday flying the plane. He mentioned that he had taken flying instructions,
Yeah,
and I imagine that he got them for free.
yep. That's
And
all sites do.
yeah, and he goes to get this plane, and he just asks them for the plane and walks out with it. Now he has a plane. And it kind of made me think that, you know, sites need to have a very good like moral education, or a very good
Yeah,
like ethical education. Otherwise, the whole world would just be like, not the whole world, but the whole Scythedom would just be like Grand Theft Auto 5 or
yeah,
Saints
yeah,
Row, where
yep,
people are
yep.
just doing whatever they want,
Stealing
flying
whatever they
planes
want, going
into
crazy and
like,
crashing everything. Yeah,
yeah. Like,
yep,
could you imagine if the Scythedom had gone even more wrong, and you had like all these immature sides who are doing whatever they want? Because after they graduate into full Scythedom, they're not beholden to a master anymore. They can
yeah.
do whatever they want.
Absolutely whatever they want.
And so if they're not trained ethically and morally, then what's stopping them from driving a jet ski into
Yeah,
like
into a jet
a
engine and like,
cabana or something? Yeah.
yep, killing a bunch of people and this, that, and they're like, oh, it's a scythe action.
Yeah.
I just did it
Like
because I wanted to.
every day is just a party. Just
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. um all right, so that's all I have for just like random notes. Let's talk about some of these main characters and favorite characters, and let's talk about just like what like where these characters went in this book, because the last episode we kind of described who they are and what they stand for, what we like about them.
Yep.
But what happened to them in this book, and like, of course, how do we feel about it? What did we like about them in this book?
Of
But
course, yeah.
where did they end up in this book, Gabe? What do you think about Citra?
So so Citra, I think that Citra becomes, and I want to make a little correlation between Citra and Roan, right? Because obviously last book they fell asleep in the Vault of Relics and Futures, and of course in this book they get, I guess, woken up, right? They're deadish, but they get revived as these two kind of figures. And Citra takes this route of like very much like the enlightened one, I guess you could say. Like she's very much the voice of wisdom throughout this book and kind of teaching people about the plots and mysteries that have been hidden, whereas Rowan takes this like very much black sheep approach, right? He's very much the accused. He's the one to blame. He's this, that, and the other. So I think Citra's part in this book is very much, of course, it's important, but it's very important to the story of the two, I guess they're main characters, I would say, right?
Oh
Citra and
yeah,
Rowan, of course. And so it's cool to see Citra's, and like as you know, I see the notes here, her transmissions are very Hunger Games, right? The way that she like says and lines everything out, right? She's like, okay, have you guys looked for this? If you haven't looked for this, then I'm going to show you this, and I want you to do the rest of the work yourself, right? And so she
right.
kind of like shows this mass of people how to like correlate through the brain brain and find all these facts about all the stuff that happened and whatnot. And so that's super cool. And yeah, I don't know if I have a whole lot more about Citra. Again, she's super important. Transmissions were very important, and she plays a key role in the mass of people finding out about this plot. I guess it was to that's like also part of the main story of the Scythe, right? Like this
Right.
plot is like a huge chunk of why the Scythe gets destroyed or gets whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that's for Citra. We'll talk about Ronan in a second. That's my Citra story.
So yeah, Citra, we kind of learn in the first book as she's looking for Faraday, she gets really good at digging through the back
Yeah.
brain. And she is told that all these people have looked through the back brain and they can't find this thing. They're looking for something that has to do with like the Mars
Yep.
colony, and they're trying to figure out who keeps bringing this experiment down because people are trying to get to Mars, but somebody's messing it up. And they're like, we've looked at this so many times that we need a fresh pair of eyes, but we also don't want to tell you what
Yeah.
you're looking
Yep.
for. And so I thought it was really interesting how it was such a it was such a subtle clue that I only noticed on this very last reread, that I did just a few days ago. He digs into the back brain and she looks up the Mars colony, but the only thing that comes up on the search when she does that is a child's drawing of Mars.
Yeah.
And, Tenka Menon said it's about what you don't see as much as what you do see.
Yeah.
So, why in the search results would the only thing that comes up about Mars is a child's drawing? Like, the only reason that would happen is because there's been a Scythe order for no
Take down.
news about
Yep.
Mars, and the Thunderhead cannot show anything else about Mars if a Scythe declares it so.
Yeah.
And it was such an interesting little it was such an interesting little clue that had been just kind of grazed over, like, oh yeah, when she looked up Mars, the only thing that came up was this child's drawing, and then it went on to something else. And when I caught it this last time, I was like, oh dang, yeah, that's because nothing would come up. Like knowing what we know, knowing what we know about the Scythe and how they stopped the Mars colonization, like that makes sense. Like nothing would come up. That's consistent.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was pretty cool. It's very Hunger Games in the
Yep.
way that she kind of becomes like this main symbol of rebellion, and she's releasing these videos talking about, like, in the Hunger Games, they're talking about the Capitol and kind of exposing all these things that the Capitol is doing.
Yep.
And then in this book, she's like exposing the Scythedom. And so I don't know, like, I don't really know what that was all about. I don't know if it was just supposed to be like a nod to Hunger Games,
Yeah.
but I was kind of like, this is obviously, like, this is exactly what Hunger Games did.
Yep.
So I was like, all right, it's a little weird, but whatever.
It worked. It worked great.
It worked good.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked Citra in this book. She's more adult and
Yeah.
headstrong in this book, and she kind of has her focus more on defeating the Scythedom,
Yeah.
and not really defeating the Scythedom, but really defeating Goddard.
Yep.
And it's not until the very end when she sees Rowan that makes her be like, you know what, I've done enough, and leaves with him because she loves him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for most of the book she's kind of got like this straight face, like girl on a mission kind
Yep.
of thing. One of the one of the coolest sentences in this book, I love this sentence. It said, Jericho knew that Anastasia's heart belonged to her bleak night. And I was like, that's such a good way to describe Rowan and Anastasia.
Yeah.
Like her bleak night, her dark warrior.
Yep. Or Dark Avenging Angel.
Yeah. Her and Rowan never see their families again. Like,
Yeah.
after they went into like after Citra had dinner with her family in like the second book or whatever, she never sees her family ever again after that. I thought that was pretty sad.
Yep. I honestly didn't quite make that connection. I mean, I knew that she did in the last book, but I didn't make the connection that she didn't see them again. So that is
Yeah.
sad.
But yeah, like, I think this book just really shows kind of how much she's grown up. In the second book, she has this moment with Curie where she sees Curie glean for the first time, and she calls her out in public, and she's like, how could you glean like that? Like, that's so, like, irresponsible or whatever. Like, that's so, like, terrible. Like, you didn't
Yeah.
even give them a chance to, like,
Yep.
know they were being gleaned. And in this book, she sees Tenkamenon glean, and she kind of has this like stunned reaction to it,
Yeah.
but she doesn't let it show on her face. And she even says, like, I've seen worse gleanings
Yeah.
than the way he gleans. And so that kind of shows how much she's grown. She's really really grown into like being a Scythe and being kind of like this honorable, wise woman.
Yep. So let me ask you a question here. So Tenkamenon, and again, memory's not the best, but I remember Tenkamenon, he's gonna glean a guy and he says, what's your dream, right? This guy's like, I want to sail around the world. It's like, okay, I'll give you 6 months. Let's go buy a boat tomorrow, right? He buys this guy a boat that he's gonna glean. So what about, were you correlating the fact that like Citra and him both had kind of the same, like, let me give you time to figure out what you want gleaning method? Or was it the other time that Tenkamenon like gleaned this guy on the spot, right? Because he was like, that guy wasn't ready, or I don't know if I'm remembering
So
correctly, but I do remember there was two different ways that he did it.
Right. So it all happened in the same scene. There was two guys sitting in front of him,
Okay.
and one of the guys he asks like, what's your goal in life? And he gives him
Yeah.
the boat. He gives him
Yep.
6 months. And then the other guy was all excited, and Anastasia is standing behind him.
Okay. Okay.
And Ten Commandments like, or the guy asks him like, "Are you gonna ask what I want?" And he's like, "Unfortunately, death is not that kind."
Yeah.
And
Okay.
he
All right.
gleans him on the spot.
Yep. Yep.
And initially Anastasia kind of has like this like instant reaction. I
Yeah.
I forget exactly
I know, I
how it
remember
was
that, but then
worded.
it specifically says that she like I hid it, like I hid my reaction the best I could. Yada yada.
Right,
Yep.
right. And so the way he gleaned the second guy was viewed as almost kind of cruel after seeing this other person
Yeah.
get everything they wanted, and then the second guy gets gleaned on the spot. And then they have this moment about like, you know, I was kind of modeling after your gleaning style. I like that you give people time. And
Yep.
so that was
I got you. No, that was good. That was perfect clarification.
um yeah, so that's pretty much Citra, this book. And all these characters down below, I kind of want to talk about the ending as a whole. And so
Yeah.
we'll kind of talk more about like where they ended up. Let's talk about Rowan for a little bit. We don't see a whole lot of Rowan this book, but what do we see, Gabe?
Oh gosh. So yeah, so when Rowan comes into play, right? Again, like I said, like he's the absolute black sheep. Like he is the one that's gonna take all the blame. He's gonna make everything right for Goddard. Like this is the person who did what they did, Sunken Dora, yada yada yada. And then of course, there has to be a plot twist, right? So he's up on this pyre, he's about to get burned in front of hundreds of thousands of people. So many people are watching this online. They're in the stadium. It's at this big stadium, right? And and then all of a sudden the Texas thighs them, right? Scythe them comes to
Yeah,
save him, right? They grab him. They're like, no, we need to figure this out a little bit more. And so don't they invite his parents, right? Don't they bring his mother, right, and his brother in to come
to
convince him that
convince him.
what he's doing as the what was his name? I
Lucifer.
want Lucifer, side Lucifer. I was saying Black Robe. Um, that what he's doing is correct. And so you see this kind of like challenge of Black Sheep. That changes. Goddard doesn't get his way. And then, of course, Goddard has a freak out, right? Goddard melts down
Yeah,
and decides to just go
lean the whole
nuts,
stadium.
clean the whole stadium, right? He orders
Yeah,
all of his size, all the New Order guys to clean this entire stadium just because Rowan escaped, right? And the person wasn't up there and he's just so angry. And that's because of I like to think that's because of Tiger's body, right? I think the whole anger
yeah.
thing is all
Oh, for
because of
sure.
that. Yep. And so that's always
Definitely.
interesting to see. Um, but then yeah, you see him kind of change his role a little bit in the sense of like he's going from this kind of hopeless like black sheep, like he's ready to die, accepted it, he's ready to do what he does, and then all of a sudden he gets a second chance of like, wait, maybe I can still make a difference, maybe I can still do this, and then of course from there on you get further on to where they're at the atolls and whatnot. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I thought it was funny because like you know, the whole book, he's just going from one
prison, yeah,
incarceration
to
to
the
the
next,
other.
yeah, yeah,
Like at first he wakes up and he's in a jail cell in Pozuelo's camp,
yep, and then
and Pozuelo is holding him in like this prison, and he doesn't get to see anybody, like nobody comes by to talk to him. Meanwhile, Citra is in like a hospital bed essentially, and she has Pozuelo coming and playing games with her every
yep,
day and like talking to her for hours, and probably watching TV or whatever she
oh,
wants
of
to do.
course, yeah,
And so it was funny to see the difference between them, because they're both, during the book, they're almost like both prisoners in a way, but
yeah,
being treated very differently. And Rowan Rowan, I feel like he was about to get Pozuelo on his side.
Yeah.
And also, if I were Citra, she had so much time with Pozuelo. She should have like, I would have just like sat him down and told him everything that's happened over the
Yeah.
past two books, you know, and just told him like everything Goddard's done, tell him everything that's happened, and then, you know, show him, convince him that even though Rowan did these things, like he's
Or
not
they think they're ruined because it's all Goddard, right? Goddard's the entire play in this whole part. It's what Goddard says that he did.
right, right. And so I think she should have pushed harder to, you know, uh convince Pozuelo
Pozuelos,
that
yeah.
Rowan was innocent. Pozuelo also was upset that Rowan had, you know, killed Sides.
Yeah.
And that's something that Rowan did do,
Yep.
but
Yep.
I feel like for the most part, given enough time, people could get on board with that.
Of course. Yeah, I would agree.
Um, but yeah, like you said, Rowan goes from one incarceration to getting picked up by the Mid-American Scythedom,
Yep.
and then he gets put on this pyre, and then the Texas Scythedom comes and gets him and incarcerates him. They don't let
Yep.
him leave, and they give him a laptop so that he can kind of see what the current events are. But that's like the only kindness that they really show him. They have him locked up in the Texas Scythedom,
Yeah.
and they're essentially blackmailing him to be an assassin for them.
Yep.
And they don't even want him to assassinate bad sides. They just want him to assassinate people
What they
who,
want. Yeah.
yeah,
Just people
like
that they
people who
choose.
oppose them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then from there, he's heading towards. He's gonna kill this, I think, Japanese Scythe. I think he's
Yep.
in like Tokyo or something.
And then that's when Sirius kind of involves himself a little bit and gets
Yes.
starts giving him
Yeah.
some information on how to get out of it.
Yeah. Sirius shows up and sticks him in a crate full of dead Tonus,
Deadish. Yep.
and
Yep.
then he gets shipped out to the atoll. Um, yeah, I guess there's really not much to say about Rowan in this book. I really wouldn't even say he had much of an arc this book.
Yeah.
He just wasn't in it that much. Um, he has an arc near the end, but that
Yeah.
we don't really get to see
That's right. It
exactly.
ends almost before it starts for sure.
Right. Yeah. Um, let's talk about Faraday. What happened to where do we see Faraday at the beginning of this book?
Oh gosh. I have so at the beginning of this book, they're already on the atoll or are they not? Or are they flying to the atoll?
They're flying.
Okay, they're flying. All right, I just had to clear that up. So yeah, so him and Monira are on their way to the atoll. They've kind of figured out this puzzle piece that they've been looking for, right? The Thunderhead doesn't know this area. It's flown planes the opposite way, yada yada yada. And so they think that this could potentially be the fail-safe of the founding Scythe. And so they're on their way to the atoll, trying to figure this out. And of course, they get what they bargained for.
Right.
They get there, there's some defenses in place, shoot the plane down, this, that, and the other, and then from there, they kind of start this like, I guess, and honestly, I would say that this part of the book, right, where like they get there, right, and the Thunderhead starts involving himself in a way where he's not really involving himself, but he is to a point where he can help out a little bit, is
Right.
probably one of my favorite parts of this last book when they
Yeah.
start this kind of atoll experience and whatnot. So Faraday gets there, start figuring out what's going on.
The Nimbus agents show
Nimbus
up.
agents show up exactly on a boat. You know, there's thousands of them or hundreds of them, or whatever, and their boats get shot up, and they come in on those whatever life preserver things where they get,
Yeah.
knocked out and then shot up with drugs or whatever it is. And then so after that, right, he kind of takes a position of he's like unhappy. He's like, this is not, I'm gonna, and I don't really know the best way to describe it, but he kind of like falls
Well,
off, right? He gets his own
he
island. He does his,
he
go ahead, go
finds
ahead.
he finds out about Curie and
Yep.
Citra
Okay, and
that they're
that's
dead.
when he falls off. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yep. And so yeah, he gets just depressed like anybody else would. He gets really, really sad. And he decides, I'm gonna be a hermit. I'm gonna go to my own island. I'm gonna keep to myself. I don't need to know anything about what's going on. I'm just gonna be okay by myself. And then of
Yeah.
course that doesn't happen, continues on, and he eventually gets involved in what's going on when Citra shows up.
Right. Yeah, I thought his character arc for this book was pretty interesting because he starts the book out super hopeful.
Yeah.
He's on the plane making jokes with Monira.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, what is the quote? Let me find it. So Faraday and Monira are flying into the atoll, and
Yep.
it keeps asking him like, uh, unidentified aircraft, please identify
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he keeps saying like, I'm a Scythe, I'm Scythe Faraday, and then it's like, please identify yourself. And so finally, it gets back to him and says, Scythe ring detective, or Scythe ring detected. And he turns to Monira and says, see, we're fine. And then it comes back and says, unidentified
Yeah.
aircraft, please
Yeah.
identify yourself. And
Yep.
he says, blast, which is exactly what the island did.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought that was funny.
No, that is good. I like that.
But yeah, he kind of has this interesting arc where he's like hopeful at the beginning. He's looking for the atoll. They find it. And even when they're initially on the island, him and Monira are hopeful and they're looking through all these Scythe journals. They find the Scythe robe, this little bunker, and they're kind of living as castaways. Then the Nimbus agents show up and he asks them like, how's Curie? How's Anastasia? And they're like, oh, how long have you been here? And he's like, we've been
Yeah.
here like, however many months, like 6 months or whatever. And she's like, oh, you should probably sit down, and tells them about, Endura sinking. And then he goes into this funk.
Yep.
And he's treating Monira horribly. And, I kind of feel like Monira didn't get a whole lot of love in this book because even at the end, we don't get much of her. Like we see that Monira and him enable the failsafe, but then there's nothing really about her after that.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
Well,
and
and even then, in the end, like she wasn't quite really involved. Like, didn't him and Citra went there first, and she was like, "Why am I left out?"
right, yeah, him and Citra went there first, and she was really upset.
Yeah.
And then Citra left, and he needed somebody to use the ring, and so he
Yeah.
asked Monira to do it.
Yep.
And yeah, he was being like super grumpy the whole time he was on there, and he secretly wanted Monira to come by, and she did, but he
Yeah.
would like tell her to leave and stuff like that. Um, I thought it was so funny, especially the way the narrator read it. When they first show up on the island, she's waking up from being deadish, and she gets out of the thing, and he like comes running up to her, and he goes, or she says, "What's happened?" And he's like, "I have good news. We are officially
Yeah.
castaways."
Yeah. Yep.
Like all like excited about it. She's like,
Yeah.
"Why is that a
Stoked
good
about it.
thing?"
It's like, yes.
But yeah, and then you know, he has some really good moments at the end. He has good moments all throughout the book. I didn't write a whole lot of them down, but the ones he has at the end were my favorite. And he says they're talking about how the Thunderhead has changed its nature by making everybody unsavory and by creating a new Thunderhead and talking to unsavories.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of baffled by what the Thunderhead is doing. And she says, like, the world is changing. And he says, the world wasn't supposed to change, Monira. It was a well oiled machine in sublime perpetual motion.
Mm.
I'm like, man, that was a really good
Yep.
really good way to put that. And it just kind of shows like, you know, it shows the difference between their world and our world is in our world, we expect the world to change. Like we know that it's not forever going to
Yeah.
be the same and that it's always going to change on
Yep.
us. And in their world for 200 years, nothing has changed.
It's
They reached
identical.
the
Yeah.
pinnacle of what humankind is, or like, you know, how humankind can at least be cared for.
Yep.
And so he's kind of baffled by the world changing. And yeah, I think the world is just set up as this thing that constantly corrects itself and constantly like maintains itself.
Yeah.
So for this to happen, it's like it's like
Very
a
out of the
shock to
ordinary.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very out of the ordinary for sure.
When the Thunderhead is doing everything that it's doing on the atoll and things are finally like Citra is there with all these dead Tonus and they're all going to get sent up to the sky.
Yep.
He says to Monira, it's showing us what would have been a perfect solution had we Scythes been worthy. A
Yeah.
perfect partnership. We glean, and the Thunderhead sends the gleaned to the stars to live again. And I thought that was such a good quote because
Yes.
it shows like if you know we talked last week about how the Scythedom is like in a perfect world, the Scythedom is this one part of the world that is imperfect.
Yep.
And you know, if they had just not gotten in the way, if they had just let the Thunderhead do its thing, it would have had this perfect solution to, you know, overpopulation.
Yep.
And it would have even included the Scythedom.
Yeah.
It would have said like, you guys glean and then I'll take them and send them into space so that they can live again.
Yep.
And so it kind of goes back to, you know, there's no way that they could have known. You
Yeah.
know, there's no way that they could have known that the Thunderhead would have come up with this perfect solution that would have appeased everybody.
Yep.
It's kind of this great moment because it's too late. You know what I mean? Like it's way too late for this plan to be enacted. The Thunderhead is just trying to get one last batch of humans off the Earth
Yeah.
before Goddard screws everything up.
Yep.
And luckily they defeat Goddard, so they defeat the Scythe really. So there is kind of this question of, you know, if they had defeated the Scythedom and they had not enacted the failsafe, would the Thunderhead have kept sending people up to Mars? And I even wonder after the failsafe, are people still getting sent up to Mars to like the Thunderhead could take healthy people and send them up to Mars to get them away from all these nanites that are in the air causing this plague. And so I wonder if it did something like that. The other really good quote I have by Faraday is, what is it about us, Monera? What is it that drives us to seek such lofty goals, yet tear out the foundations from under us? Why must we always sabotage the pursuit of our own dreams? And she says, we are imperfect beings. How could we ever fit in a perfect world?
Yep.
And I'm like, man, that's
good right there.
That's good because, you know, the Thunderhead is technically perfect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't really make mistakes.
Yep.
And it's creating what technically is this perfect world for humans, but humans are imperfect. So even no matter who the human is, no matter how advanced they are, if you put them in a perfect world, there's going to be an imbalance because humans are not perfect. And so for them to live in this perfect world is just not going to work out. And so no matter what type of environment you put the human in, they are not perfect beings. And so it kind of leads to all this disastrous stuff, and it leads to jealousy and pride and envy. And like he says, like why are we sabotaging ourselves? It's like, because that's what humans do. Like,
Yeah.
no matter,
Yep.
you can put them in any environment, they're still going to sabotage
Yeah.
themselves
Always.
because
Always.
of all these other emotions that come into play. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about
No, that's good.
Faraday in
Yeah.
this book?
I would have, that's all I was gonna say about the kind of the ending of the book, but we'll, like you said, talk about it later.
Okay. So let's talk about our favorite bad guy here, Goddard. Um, we love to hate him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what were your feelings on Goddard for this book? He's just as
Again,
bad as ever, but
just as bad as ever. And like I said before in the last episode, like, right, I've never been so frustrated with a bad guy. Like, I really,
yeah,
like, the stuff that he would say and that he would do in this book was so infuriatingly, it would make me so mad, and I get so frustrated. Just his outlook and the way that he would lie and try and manipulate, and like all this stuff was just absolutely infuriating to
yeah.
me.
I think the part that really got me was when um, he was like changing the definition of bias.
Bias, yeah.
Like he had all these people around like a table, and all the high blades of the other continents
Yep,
and
yep.
stuff, I think. Or it was either that or the other people in his
I think it was
employ
his,
all the
yeah,
sides.
his retinue, like his immediate area, and he's like, we're just gonna change the definition of bias because that's the only workaround that we have. We're gonna make it
Right.
work.
And it makes, in a really sick way, it makes sense because
It does, yeah.
sides, like, they have these rules that they can't change because they're part of the Scythe commandments, but a scythe can change the definition of a word. Like,
Yeah,
scythes have the power to change definition of a word. And so he like declared bias to mean this like other definition that opened it up a little bit so that he could, glean certain people. And so then he asks everybody around the table, he's like, who would you glean if you could, if you wanted to get rid of a certain group, who would
yeah,
you who would you glean? And some people were like really uncomfortable with it. And Rand is like, I would glean, she either said short people or ugly people.
short people. It
Short
was, yeah,
people.
short people. Yep.
And she's like, I would glean short people.
Because
and
I don't like him. That's like
and
our main reason.
yeah. And other people, or someone else was like, I would glean certain people of some ethnicity, like,
Yeah.
or the ethnic outliers, because most
Yep.
of the, going back to the world at large, most of the world has kind of conglomerated into a unified race, kind of, that's like
Yep.
the best of all races. And so he's like, yeah, I would hunt down the outliers and glean them, like literally making him the racist at the table. Like,
Yeah,
he's
for
like
sure.
literally the racist.
Yep. The one
And
person.
yeah. And then other people are like, I would glean Tonus and all these different people. And so I should have written down what the definition was that he changed bias to, but he changes the definition. And then they have like this program where they have people mail in requests for their group, whatever it may be, to be excused from excessive gleaning,
Yeah.
meaning that they couldn't like be excused from gleaning altogether, but excused from excessive gleaning.
And he
Um,
started a committee. Like, that was just like he started a full-blown committee for that exact thing, right? So the people that
yeah,
would have to check in and say, like, all right, I'm with this group. We want to apply for this protection against excessive gleaning. can we do that? And then of course it was all to what Goddard wanted. So like if you were Tonus, no, you can apply for that. If you were this,
Right.
sure, we'll let you
Yeah.
handle it.
It all fit his
Into his plan, yeah.
right. Yeah. The other scary thing that we kind of see in this book is, what did you think about how much like power Goddard was amassing? Because like I think at the very beginning of the book, we see him become so
High Blade,
he's
right? I mean, he basically
yeah,
lies and says like, "Hey, they chose me to be High Blade. They're dead, so I'm gonna be High Blade."
right, right,
Yeah, and it was scary. It was terrifying the amount because not only after that, but even after that, he started amassing, absorbing these different, Mid-American, North American, like these other systems, right? That like didn't
yeah.
weren't quite sure, but then all of a sudden he won them over and absorbed them, and it was
Yeah.
scary. It was super scary.
And they ended up all being like his undersides,
Yeah,
essentially. Like I think they called him a intercontinental overblade.
yeah, yeah.
And so
Yep.
he's just going to all these other countries and like amassing this power, doing whatever, like probably blackmail and all sorts of other
Oh,
stuff
for sure. Yeah.
to get these people under him. And he didn't want to just be partnered with him. He didn't want to be partnered with them. He wanted power. Like that's the only thing he cared
Yeah.
about.
That was,
And
yep.
I kind of wonder what he would do once he had all the power, like once he had every continent, because there's only so many of them.
Yeah.
I wonder what he would have done once he had gotten to that point, because there would have been really nowhere else for him to go.
Yeah.
Um, but we see this. Do you remember this scene with Goddard with all the diamonds on the bed?
Yeah. Yeah.
He, he essentially like he's got like his share of the diamonds, but then this scene happens right after he becomes the intercontinental high blade. I think it does, and he has their diamonds too, and so he has like way more diamonds than anybody else.
Yep.
And he even admits to himself in that scene that it's not so much about having the diamonds or their monetary value or like because he can make more sides.
Yeah.
It's all about his ego and having more than everybody else.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
all that's all he cares about.
And
um
so really
yeah,
quick
but
with that too, there's, and this, I'm asking this as a question. There was a point in time where Goddard addresses a different, I don't know if it was Argentinian or it was some other side them where he was like,
Texas.
Texas, was that the one where he's like, hey, like, listen, I'm gonna donate these diamonds to you, right? Is that what he says? Or like something along those lines where he's like, I want to give you these, not out of, I don't know, power or whatever else. I'm trying to remember the way that he does that, but there's a scene where he's like basically just really manipulating them, like
Yeah,
super duper manipulation. But it has to do with diamonds. Like he's either giving them to him or he's like, they didn't get their cut, so I'm gonna give them a cut of mine
that
type thing.
so that's what it was essentially. So the the diamonds got sent from Pozuelo to the uh, North America regions,
Okay.
and then he like confiscated everybody's
Yeah.
diamonds, and he told them like, your diamonds are here for you, but I'm gonna hold on to them.
Yeah.
He's like, your diamonds are here, and you can have them whenever you create a new scythe, but I'm gonna be holding on to them.
Yep.
And so it's kind of this power move. It was all ego and
It's all
arrogance
power. It's
and
all
power.
power. That's all it is.
But yeah, so then we learn, and I'm just going to go all the way through Goddard's
Do
ending
it. Yeah.
because I'm going to, when we actually get down to the ending down below, I'm going to forget about Goddard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, so we find out that Goddard was one of the recruits before he was a scythe. He was one of the colonists on Mars, and or was it the moon?
No, I think it was I want to say the Mars colony personally,
Okay,
but it could have been the moon.
so he's out there on Mars, and I would love to know exactly what happened, but it looked like Xenocrates went out there and like made him a apprentice.
Yeah.
Because like Xenocrates went out there and then nobody had ever heard of him again. Like
Yep.
his name went away, and then the only thing people knew was Scythe Goddard.
Yeah.
And so yeah, essentially Goddard realized that if people get sent out to Mars, there's going to be way less gleaning. The gleaning quota is going to go way down.
Yeah.
And he didn't want that to happen. He wants to be
No.
able to
You
kill. He wants all
love to
this
murder.
power. And so, and so, he organizes this with other sides, and I would love to know more about how he convinced them to do it, unless they all just had the same mindset as him, where he convinces them to glean entire spacecrafts full of colonists.
Yeah.
And even something about, I think each of the sites that did that basically had to do it during a self glean. Like they exploded the whole shuttle because they had to make it look like an accident.
Yep. Yep.
And so they had to glean themselves as well as all the colonists. They would explode the rocket ship. And so eventually the Thunderhead, after doing this a couple times, the Thunderhead realized like, oh, I have to stop sending people out to space
Because they'll just die.
Goddard is just going to kill him.
Yeah.
And so, that was a pretty interesting turn of events. I mean, I expected Goddard to be involved with it in some way.
Yeah.
But like going and finding the guy who lives out in the Shire, what's his name? I have his name down below, I think.
Right.
But like going and finding him and Alighieri.
Alighieri, yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Besides Alighieri.
And yeah, going and finding him, and he's just like kind of this crazy old man who's been
really old, man. Like really old.
Really old.
Turned several corners. Like his face is all messed up because of it.
Yeah. He was like mortal at one time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he's like 260 or something.
Yep. Yep.
And they go out there and he basically tells them like, yeah, Goddard engineered the whole thing, and like we were doing it for the betterment of the Scythedom. And it kind of appeared like he got this deal where he took part in this gleaning, and then he was able to just kind of drift away into obscurity. Like,
yeah,
nobody really kept up with his gleaning journals. He said that he only gleaned people when they would come to his door. So obviously nobody's really checking in on him. And I kind of wonder how Goddard pulled that off.
I mean, the dude's a mastermind.
Yeah.
It's like, it's crazy to see him do his like, I mean, he's like working his craft. Like the guy is literally like a master manipulator.
Yeah.
In every sense.
So in the end, he's trying to like bomb the atoll, and he sees that they're all trying to take off for space, and so he's shooting missiles at them and all this stuff, and then he gets Citra. He hits Citra with something, or she gets hit by shrapnel.
Yep.
And then Rand takes him down as he's on his way to finish off Citra and Rowan. Rand, for no other reason other than, what I liked about Rand is she always had a selfish reason for everything she did. She's not this character where she has an arc of becoming a good guy. Like in the end, she's still not really a good guy.
Yeah.
Her reason for taking down Goddard was because she knew this would be a huge controversy and that her name would get dragged in with his.
Yep.
And so I thought that was really interesting how the normal trope is this bad guy who's kind of been like a sideline bad guy eventually, kind of thwarts their boss or like turns on their boss or whatever to save the good guy. And it's usually like, oh, deep down they have a heart of gold. And I really like that, Neal Shusterman stayed true to who Rand is.
Yeah.
And he made sure that she stayed the same character all the way across.
Yep.
And in the end, she's doing it because she wants to do it, not because of some random benevolence on her part. You know what I mean? I really like that about her.
I agree.
But then she takes she takes Goddard and she supplants him with Tiger. And and that's something probably to talk about, because I think it was in this book where Rand is going to the sanctuaries,
memory construct place.
Yes.
Yep.
To see Tiger, even though his conversation is limited because he's essentially a very minimal AI in this chamber, in this holographic thing. She just goes there to see him because she realizes that she loves him.
Yeah, exactly. That's
and
she realizes she's in love. And
she even goes there to like right before Rowan is about to be put on the pyre. She goes there to tell Tiger to see what his reaction would be. And I thought that moment, like I said, she didn't change her character, but if she was going to, I thought that moment would be the one moment where she does kind of turn a corner and turns around as a character, because Tiger is telling her, like, no, you can't let him die. Like, you can't let this happen to him. Like, that's my friend. And then she's tying Rowan's wrists or whatever. She went to visit him right before he was about to be burned.
Yep.
And I was like, surely this is going to be the moment where she frees him once again, and now the reason is because Tiger told her to do it. But no, she's like, yeah, you're gonna be burned, and she lets him go through with it. And then it's the Texas Scythe that saves him. But then to be supplanted with Tiger at the end for Goddard is just like icing on the cake. Because he gets like 93% of his body back. He just has a different head.
That's right. And that 7% obviously makes a big difference because they put up a huge fight about it.
Right. All right. We're going to need to split this into 2 episodes so that we don't upload a daunting 4-hour podcast. Join us on the next episode where we'll continue talking about Grayson Tolliver, along with all our other favorite characters, our favorite quotes, and our favorite moments, including the action-packed ending to The Toll by Neal Shusterman. Thank you so much for listening to the Fantasy Files. If you would like to support the show, again, please click the like and subscribe button down below and follow us on Twitter @FilesFantasy to keep up with all the new content and discussion there. Until next time, resonate well and true. I'll rejoice.
I'll rejoice. I'll rejoice and resonate.